Welcome back, listeners, to the Inspired Writer Collective podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jenny Benitez, and I am honored that we get to be the first podcast where she is appearing as a guest. She has her own podcast called Steel Roses, and if you're coming here from there, welcome, Jenny's listeners. I have just recorded an episode as a guest on her podcast, so we're doing a bit of a podcast swap because we have some similar overlap as far as wanting to empower women to embrace their authentic messages and creating space for women to show up in the world and share their stories. So Jenny comes with a background in communications and she is providing that, bringing that structure to her podcast environment and is in season 3 of her podcast. So Jenny, welcome to the Inspired Writer Collective.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. I'm so excited about this. I said it on our recording. I'm like, you're such a light. My daughter noticed it immediately. She's only 7. She picked up on it. So I'm excited to be here. And yes, I thought it was very like a fun little tidbit that this is my first time being a guest. Where
That's so amazing. I remember that conversation we had where we did sort of our, mutual interest meeting. I think, did I find you on Threads or Instagram or something?
know how we found each other. It was obviously
anyways. Yeah, because as soon as we hopped on that video together and sort of our interest call that we do with all of our guests before we ever record, like you and we just vibed. I mean, normally I spend like 30 minutes on one of those, and I think we were getting close to like an hour or so. Because, we were talking about our shared interest in writing and journaling and the impact that that's had on our mental health and just our insights for ourselves. And then we got into like the background of like being a podcast host and what that's like to sort of be that representative, to share your voice and create space for other people. And we were just so unified in our like broader, I guess, goal or passion for creating space, particularly for women to share their voices and fostering that. And so I just instantly felt resonance with you. You've already sent a couple of guests to the Inspired Writer Collective, which some we've already interviewed. The other ones will be coming up soon. So I just love the connection that we've made. And it speaks to the power of podcasting and writing and community that like you can find such like-minded people and then just instantly connect with them, and it can have such an impact. So thank you for joining us over here. I can't wait to see where our discussion goes today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be on here with you and to just really be talking from a guest perspective, because as you said, like podcasting itself, I'm always, from the interviewer side, wanting to make sure that like I have my guest and that I'm making sure they're the highlight of the episode. So to have the flip, I'm like, oh, like this is interesting.
It's so fun.
It is. It's cool. I like it. The pressure is not on me. So I feel a little relieved.
Well, I do hope the listeners here go back and listen to that episode. So if you're just finding us here, please go back, because I think I shared more of my personal story on your podcast as a guest than I've ever been able to share here for that same reason. Like as the host, yes, we throw in some relatable tidbits or experiences, but like you said, for a large part, we try to shine the light on our guests. We try to provide that platform for our guests. And so with that, I want to hear a little bit more about your story as far as why you wanted to create the podcast and why you felt like women needed more of a space.
Sure. So the podcast itself, it was something that I had been organically just talking about for years. Like, I mean, it was one of those things that I just kept saying. My cousin and I are very close, and every time we would be talking on the phone, that ultimately we would get to a point where I was like, we can't be the only ones going through this. Like in our marriages, with our children, with our jobs, like we can't be the only ones going through this, but no one's really talking about any of this. Like there needs to be a better way. There needs to be a platform for this. We need to start normalizing this. And I was getting frustrated because I would even feel it amongst my female peers, other mothers at the, pick up and drop off, where you would feel almost that like judgment, and that like, oh, just like that underlying tension. And I'm like, this necessary. Like, none of this is necessary. We're all going through the same things, and people, and I'm going to drill it down to women specifically, have this need to be perfect and to show this perfection all the time and to not admit, admitting that you fight with your husband is like defeat, or your fight with your partner is defeat, or that, you're divorced, or that your kids don't listen to you, like that it reflects poorly on me. Like, none of kids listen to them. Is anyone aware? Nobody's children listen. So it sort of kind of came from there. So there was this in the back of my mind, like, oh, I want to have a platform where I can normalize for women. It's okay to be imperfect because none of us are perfect. And then I had a moment, it was a pivotal moment personally for me where I work in communications and marketing for pharmaceutical companies. I love what I do. I really do. I love it. It's been a really great career path for me. I happen to be very good at communications. But I had hit this moment about 2 years ago. It was summer of 2022. And I was put on this project that was way more than I could handle. And I had voiced that opinion and said, this is really way more than I can handle. I don't have capacity for this. But if you're working in corporate, it doesn't matter if you don't have capacity, you're going to get put on that project. I got placed on this project, and the workaholic that I was like, all right, I'm going to double down. I'm going to make sure that this is successful. And so for about 3 weeks, I didn't see my husband. I didn't see my children except for at bath time. And I got to the end of the project. I was a nervous wreck. My hand, literally to the point where like my hands were shaking. And I sent it off on its merry way to where it needed to go. The project was really well done. And it felt like I lifted my head up out of a dark place and my kids were bigger. Now, as a mom, this crushed my heart to pieces.
Yeah.
Because they were little at the time. My girls were 5 and my son was 6, and everybody just looked bigger. And I had, over the past couple of weeks, been watching from my office window upstairs. My husband was in the backyard with them playing. He taught them how to swim. He taught them how to go off the diving board. He was taking them to the park. He was the one who was doing all these things and making all these memories. And I was upstairs locked in an office on conference call. And so I got to that end of that project, and it was almost like fireworks had gone off in my head. And I was like, this is a moment where I'm going to have to make a decision. And living that workaholic corporate life is not the path that I want to go down. It's starting to suck the life out of me. It's not inspiring me any longer, because for a period of time, I felt like I could still be creative, which I could. And I was still writing because I was, and it still felt good. And I hit this catalyst moment where I was like, this pivotal moment is telling me that I am not supposed to be doing this. That's soda. Don't drink that. That's soda. Sorry. That I am not supposed to be going down this path anymore. So I took that, and in that same instance, it kind of popped into my head. Well, you talked about podcasting, Jenny. Why don't you look at podcasting? And it was literally within like a few weeks period. This was like August where this happened. September, I started researching it and getting into that creative space of, well, I'm going to podcast. Well, what is my podcast going to be called? What's my target audience? And I started going down the path of like developing what the goal of the podcast was going to be. And I started out with a partner. My cousin was a co-host in the beginning with me. She has since left the podcast, and it's just me running it now. Because it really wasn't lighting her up, but it was still lighting me up. So I kept with it. And through the podcast, I've been able to really elevate women's voices and meet people such as yourself and bring people's lives to other women. And the whole goal, the whole premise was always, I want women to have a space here. I want women to be able to come to the table and say, this is my story, because every woman that comes has a backstory. We've all gone through something. And in our shared understanding of each other, we are making each other's lives better and improving each other's lives. And we've had guests that have come onto the podcast that I'm friends with now, and that we be in touch with each other. And like, if they're having a hard time with their business or their writing or whatever they're working on, we reach out to each other. And I'm like, hey, can we just chat really quick? Like, I'm feeling uninspired. I just need somebody to like chat with. And it's been this really fantastic like journey because it has brought so much goodness into my life, including exploring writing again, which was like,
I love it.
yeah.
Well, and I hope you know this, Jenny, and if you don't, I'm about to tell you that as a podcast host, you are a storyteller because you are curating the storyline of the episode by the way that you lead the guest through conversation, that the way you take something that they've said and then you create the next and then or and so. Like that's classic storytelling, right? Where we take a particular action and then we make it make sense with the next action that follows. And that's what we as podcast hosts are doing, especially with guests. And that's what makes a really good podcast host, someone who is able to ask the right questions that continues that same conversation and allows it to go into unique and different places. So even if you weren't always writing from the beginning of podcasting, you were storytelling.
Yeah.
And that sort of oral tradition has been around since the beginning of humankind. And I think it's so cool the way that we get to carry it forward in our world with our technology and our generations where, it gets to happen virtually and you and I are on opposite sides of the country, but we get to have this connection and this conversation. And then other people get to hear our story. And it's really cool. What was it that pushed you back into writing?
So part of it, and when I say journey, like I really mean that like the past 3 years have literally been like the most interesting journey. So, that catalyst moment that I talked about where I knew like I'm going to go to podcasting, like this is going to be something that I do. There was a whole bunch of things happening at once. So I started researching how to podcast and I came across this woman who also has a podcast, named Cathy Heller. And she had this episode that was like how to podcast. So I found her out and I checked her out and then I was like, oh, wait, she has like a bunch of stuff. Like, what does she talk about? Her podcast is, she wrote a book called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And this beginnings of her was really teaching women how to get empowered with themselves and find their real purpose and to really find like what's lighting you up, because whatever's lighting you up is really going to make you successful and it's actually going to bring you a lot of wealth. So find something you're really passionate about. So I started kind of following her and then I saw that she had an online course and her courses were really based around putting yourself in alignment with your true purpose. Now, I'm going to use the universe as like how I'm referring to this. Some people will say God, you can say Allah, you can say whatever, you can call it whatever name you want to call it. It's all the same thing, in my opinion. And for me, finding her opened up this whole pathway of there are all these ways that you can really bring out who you really are. And when you're living your authentic life and who you really are supposed to be, every door is going to open for you. There is literally no limit to what kind of success you can bring to yourself and to your friends and your family. There is no limit. There is no cap. The cap is BS. People will say, oh no, you can only get this far. It is absolutely untrue. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how to become your most successful self. And, people use affirmations, meditation, they use it as buzzwords though, right? Like they don't necessarily know the true real step of being in the moment, because at its core, meditation and affirmations and all of the work that you do is actually meant to bring you present in the moment. Writing brings you present into the moment. So there are a lot of ways and methods that you can use to bring your mind to the present moment. And I started using writing as one of those methods. And I did a combination of things. I do a combination of practices. This is somebody I found through Cathy Heller called, the gentleman's name is Hal Elrod. And he created this whole system called Savers. You can look it up. He has an app. I'm like a huge follower of this guy. And part of it is you write, you do affirmations, visualization, meditation, but it's a whole package thing that you're doing for yourself. And with the writing, you're using it to help center yourself for the day, but you're also using it to do a stress relief for the day. in 2024, in the fall, I started journaling a lot heavier, and I was using it as a stress reliever. And it was helping to get the thoughts out of my head that were driving me pretty much insane. I was in a highly stressful situation with my job. It was incredibly unhappy. It was making me depressed. It was giving me anxiety, which also was like combining with the fact that I'm in my early 40s, so my hormones are falling out. Oh,
Yes.
as a woman, we don't have a lot that we have to deal with. So the writing element at the end of the day and the beginning of the day was incredibly important to me because it helped me to really just hone like, okay, this is the feeling I want to have today. There was days where I was able to write like a bunch of pages. There were some days I only wrote a paragraph and was like, my anxiety's through the roof today. I hope I can get through this. What am I going to remember for the day? Like write a little affirmation to yourself. And in doing the practice, it's going to sound insane, but it has literally changed my life. And it brought the amount of blessings that it brought into my life, people wouldn't believe it. You really wouldn't believe it. And when I first started doing it, at the time I remember, you kind of like test something out and you're like, oh, let me see if this is actually going to work. Like, is this nonsense? And this is going to sound crazy. It's going to sound very woo-woo. But when I had first started doing the writing and the meditation and everything, I had something coming financially that was terrifying me. I owed back taxes from like ages and didn't realize that, the IRS are a bunch of jerks and they were adding loads of interest onto this thing. So the bill itself was coming to around $15,000. And I had to pay it by June. Was it June 2024? I had no idea where that money was going to come from. Elizabeth, when I tell you,
I wouldn't know either. I don't know, Jenny. I don't know where the money's coming from.
Listen, I want to be really transparent here. I am not one of these people that just has like money, like 3 children, have like, wow. I am not in one of those positions. So I had no idea where this was going to come from. But all I knew, my belief in my core was, it will be okay. It's going to come. It will find its way to me. It's going to be fine. And I just held that belief and I kept writing every day and I kept the meditating practices every single day. And it was very interesting, through a series of seemingly unconnected events, the entire amount of that back tax bill was paid in full.
Wow.
Not anything. It was a very interesting, because once it happened and the money came through and then it was paid and I got that notice, I was like, you have zero balance, you're fine. I was like, oh, it worked. So it's a very important thing here that we're talking about, because you're writing to tell your story in some instances. Like, I know you're a memoir writer, so I know you're telling your story. You have every woman I know has a story to share. So that right there is important, because you're going to use your voice to share your story and to tell people, like, I've been down this path. I've made it out the other side. You can make it out the other side too. So there's that element of writing. Then there's the stress relief of writing. Get those thoughts out of your head. If you keep it in your head, it's going to turn toxic. It's going to poison you. You do not need toxic thoughts in your head. Put it on paper, light it on fire, throw it out the window. Like, in a safe way, get that energy out of your system, because the longer it's in you, the more it's going to poison you. Once you get all of that out and you can just start writing, and it could just be nonsense. I was writing about nonsense the other day. It doesn't have to have a point. You can just free write. And you can say, like, oh, I'm thinking about this, that, and the next thing. I wrote a grocery list when I was writing the other. It doesn't really matter what you're writing, but using your words to start that practice, I'm telling you, doing that will change the course of your life, because I've even seen it now. I told you the $15,000 story. There's more stories like that in my life that have consistently happened. One of them was recent. It was an $8,000 story, showed up. And I was like, well, okay, all right, we're here.
Yeah.
It's important. And I want everyone listening to your podcast to understand that yes, there's the writing element to get a story that you want to have published, and that's a beautiful, beautiful work, but there's this other part of it too that is really for your soul, and you're feeding your soul by writing.
Yeah, I love to like when you're journaling, and you were doing this morning and night, so like you're capping your day off by sort of grounding yourself and rooting yourself back in, right? And so even those little things that you might overlook when you're not journaling, you can actually recognize those blessings, those tiny little, incremental shifts and changes as they're happening because you're journaling so frequently. So then you're able to be grateful for those little ways in which things are shifting and changing. And then that just opens you up to then see the next layer and the next layer. I mean, it makes me wonder how much you might have overlooked or not recognized for what it was if you weren't actually writing in your journal. And I've certainly had some crazy universe things happen in my life. The one that most readily comes to mind was when I found out last January that the owners of my rental unit were going to sell it, and they were not going to renew my lease. And they were like, well, you can live there until it sells, but we're not going to renew. And I did not have a job at that point. I was divorced. My parents had been like helping support me financially, and I'd been spending this time writing and running the business. And all of a sudden I had to go find a new place to live. And my town is very small town, and it's kind of touristy and like exceedingly expensive for the jobs that are actually here. Most people have remote work because it's got this tourist element to it. So it makes it very expensive. And I was petrified about being able to find a safe space for me and my daughter and my cat to move to. And wouldn't you know that within 24 hours, I had found the most amazing space that allowed me to have this office, which was not even like on my radar. We needed a 2-bedroom. This was a 3-bedroom. It's right next to the bike trail, and it was just absolutely the perfect fit. And I had the financial backing from my parents to help me. And it's like all of it just beautifully came together in a way I would have never wished for myself 48 hours before.
Right.
Like if you had asked me like, hey, would you like to move? I would have been like, hell no, I don't want to move. I was so grateful I had been able to keep that place in the divorce. And I thought I was safe for a while. And the universe had bigger plans, right? Like it knew I needed a bigger pot to grow in.
Yes.
It was hard for me to stay there. I was trying to run the business and record podcasts in my living room while my kid is trying to do something behind me. But there was just a bigger thing at work. And I think when we stay so present in our journals and we are writing about just today or just the last few days, like I hate when I get too far, behind in my journal where I'm having to write multiple pages to get the last 5 days down, which I did over the holidays because they got away from me a little bit. But, when we have to look at what has happened that particular day, we can just see the smaller things more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, on the note of the smaller things, something that I've read a lot about is people when they struggle with, hearing stories like what I just told and what you just told. A lot of people will say like, well, I've tried this, it doesn't work. I've tried to be mindful and but it doesn't work. And part of the issue is that it's like a small combination of baby steps that you have to do to get there. And writing is an important element to it, but using it in the right way. So, for example, if you're hearing this and you're like, I'm going to start this, like, it sounds like nonsense, but I'm going to start it, right? Let's do it. It's 2025. Like, this is our year, people. Let's do this. So, what you would want to do, you can get any old notebook, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter really what you're using. And on a regular basis, every single day, you should jot down 3 things that you are grateful for, 3 things that make you happy. And it couldn't be small things. Like Elizabeth talked about her coffee. It could be something really small. I found a healthy, you guys heard me deterring my son from drinking my soda earlier. I found a healthy probiotic soda and I was really excited about it. So I have it sitting on my desk and he thought it was water and I was trying to get him to not, want him to just take it. So it's stuff like that you can write down and just little things to be grateful for, because Elizabeth has been in the situations, I have been in the scenarios where you feel like it's so dark that you are not going to get out. And when is it going to get better? When is this situation going to get better for me? I can't continue my life like this. I don't want to be a 9 to 5 or it's miserable. I'm not getting anywhere with my career. What am I doing? My relationships are failing. What am I doing? Take the time to invest in yourself through writing. Get the journal out. I'm sure people have loads of them. I'm sure, like, I'm not the only one who would buy them and just leave them on the bookshelf.
Or get gifted them from everywhere.
Take time to write a page. Take 5 minutes out of your day. You can't say that you don't have 5 minutes, because if you were to take your cell phone right now and look at the amount of screen time you spend on your phone and the amount of time you spend on every app on your phone, you can absolutely find time in your day to begin writing and to begin this practice. Perhaps you have a story in you that needs to be told. There might be somebody out there going through something you already went through, and you are going to change their life. Your story could change someone else's life. It's that much of a deal. So it's incredibly important to start this. And if you start it, you start this practice of, I'm going to be in the moment, I'm going to center myself, you will see a shift. It is a guaranteed thing. There is science behind a lot of this that we talk about. And it's an incredible thing to start employing. So I know I sound like I'm on a bit of a soapbox, but I really want you all to explore this, because it has made such a change in my life that I really want everyone to be doing this, because this is it.
Yes.
Everything's at your fingertips. You just have to go reach out and grab it.
I love that. And I know people have different opinions about looking back on their journals. I really get so much value out of looking back. I frankly didn't even look back until I started writing my memoir, and I had to reference to remind myself. But it was in looking back that I got to see some old cycles that I kept repeating and could figure out how to break them. It was looking back that, I could see the way that blessings would show up, or that the universe was shifting me into a new path. And so I really do like reflecting and looking back. And the other piece I really love about journaling and just writing in general, but this can still be accomplished through journaling, is the fact that there is now a written sort of documentation of what I was thinking at the time. And my daughter is only 5.5, but I think when she's older, there are going to be some points in our shared life where she's going to be curious about, well, why did this happen? Or why was it like this? And the fact that she will have access to my journals and can see how I was thinking and feeling and why I made certain decisions that, like, she'll tell me all the time that being divorced is the worst thing that's ever happened to her. And I'm like, dear girl, I hope that stays the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And I even ended up writing in the front, like in the inside flap of one of my journals, a little note to her. And I said, Ember, when you find this, I hope that as you read things and, that you ultimately see that I made these choices with the best of my knowledge that I had at the time, from a place of love. And, I hope that you just understand, where I'm coming from. And it's that piece of legacy writing that I wish we had more of, because memory is really fickle. And I remember when my sister and I were we both became new moms within the same 6-month time period. And I remember we were both asking my own mother, what was it like? We're really struggling with this. This is really hard. And she had already painted over her memory sunshine and rainbows.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually how motherhood works for her, especially with 3 kids. So, it's like, but she's already forgotten or moved on from those early days and couldn't relate to or help clue us into what we were kind of slated to go through with our whole motherhood identity shift. So there's a piece of legacy writing that I think is incredibly beautiful if you're open to ultimately sharing your journals with your kids at some point.
I found, because of our initial conversation for Christmas, I actually gifted both of my parents with guided journals. When I said to them, I was like, I don't know you as people. I know you as my parents. and I would really
Yeah.
like to know you as a person because, my parents, when they were married, very old school, like the parents were like the parents. They were perfect. You don't question them. Like this, and so I don't know them like as people, and I would really like to. And then on that same stream of thought, he's like, well, I want my kids to know me. Like they see me and they do know me. I'm a very we're very communicative here in my household. As you can tell, like I like to talk. My husband likes to talk. It's kind of we talk a lot here. And so we're very open with the kids. We're very honest with the kids. We're very straightforward with them. I explain a lot of things to them. I openly admit when I screw up and I'm like, that was my fault, guys. I messed up here. But I want them to really hear from me. So I actually had bought these booklets, and it's called like I bought ones for my daughters, and it's letters to my child. And it has letters that you open up and you can write to them for different things. And I just started thinking through them. Like, I really want them to have this, like when they get older, to be able to open this up and hear my words and hear my story, because, your kids get to a certain point where they're like, oh, mom, please shut up. Well, this is going to be like almost like a time capsule for them. And they'll get this book one day at some point and be like, wow, like mom she really had all these thoughts about us. And it's that legacy piece is really important, especially in today's digital world. Everything's digital. I interviewed somebody on my podcast about photos, and she was a professional photo organizer. And she was like, because of everything going digital, nobody has photo books anymore. Nobody has albums anymore.
I do. I print them out.
I print photos out. So like, they're on your phone, they're on social media, but then let's say they get lost in digital.
You never look back.
Don't
and I'm behind. I need to do more. But I had been really diligent for I'm probably a year behind.
Well, I mean, even that though is pretty good though.
Yeah.
And there's the writing element of it, getting your, if you were to journal, and then it's something that you're going to pass along to your children. But even like what I said with the guided journals that I gave to my parents, I'm like, this is important. This is your legacy. What you're doing right now is going to be impacting other people. Like, so make a record of it. Your life is important. Your life is significant, and you need to put that story in place. And even if you don't have kids, your life is significant. Kids are not the determining factor to being significant in life. You are impacting everyone around you. And it's important that your story gets told. You might think it's insignificant, but it's something important to somebody.
Well, especially to your kids, it could mean something one day.
Yes.
My grandma is 91, and there's so much she can't remember, especially anything new. But just the other day, I was talking to her on the phone, and I was trying to like put some timeline in her mind, and I was like, oh yeah, when the last time I was sick, or when I was really sick at college, you took me to urgent care, and that was the time when your house got broken into while you were taking me to urgent care. And she did not remember being like robbed and having all these valuables and like family heirlooms taken. Like, she just doesn't remember anymore. So like, she probably wouldn't even be able to remember a lot of the stuff that like I'd be curious about, like her upbringing, or when she was a new mom or a working woman, or how she navigated, a number of things. It's like, we just lose so many of these stories if no one's them down. And I mean, I understand when I was younger, I mean, I did keep a journal, but I lied in my journal.
Yeah.
Like, in my journals anymore, because what's the point? But when I was a kid, there was always this threat from my mom that like, if I ever suspect anything, I am going to come read your journal. So I try to make sure my journal matched, whatever story I was telling at the time, as far as where I was or who I was hanging out with or what I was thinking. I couldn't be honest, because of this fear of who would read it ultimately. And now I just have, as an adult, I have just such a different approach of, if my daughter wants to read my journals, there's going to be some stuff in there she doesn't want to read, because I'm honest. And it's not like it's bad about her, but like, she's not going to want to read some of the intimate details that I put in my journal.
Right.
Because it's my journal. But I'm not going to sit there and, lie or, not discuss key, parts of my life or my experience. So they're there. They're there for legacy purposes.
No, I think it's an incredible gift to be able to pass that down. And my grandmother is 96. So her birthday's 2025. She turned 97. I actually have plans to go visit her next week. And while I'm with her, I was actually planning to record and just the conversation because
Yeah.
my podcast is named for her. She's such a unique, significant person to myself and my family. Her name is Rose. So Steel Rose actually came from her. And she knows about the podcast and she's so proud of it because she grew up in a time where, women couldn't do anything without it was illegal for women to have birth control. It was illegal for women didn't even have their own bank accounts. Like you couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And she is such a strong presence for all of us in our family that, she inspires me to this day. Even now, like in her late 90s, like she is still very sharp and she's still doing her best and everything. And it's such an honor to have her around. And I had been thinking to myself for quite some time, like, man, I have this platform now. I have this podcast now. I would love to record her voice. And even if it's not an episode, like, I don't care. I just want to have that memory because I can now.
Well, please put it. I'm done.
And I can pass it over to my family and say, hey guys, like, I've got this memory from Grandma Rose. Like, we all can cherish this now. This is important. And it's such a beautiful thing, the writing and being able to have this story that you can pass along to somebody else and to pass along to future generations. My cousin that was my co-host, I had said to her recently, I was like, she's adopted, she's Korean. And I told her, I was like, at some point, I was like, you and your husband having your daughter, you created a whole new bloodline here in the United States that didn't exist before. You now have your own bloodline that is starting to develop. And I said to her, I was like, at some point in 3 or 4 generations, your great, great, great grandchildren are going to hear about your story and that you were adopted and brought over to the United States. You worked your butt off to become a PhD, teacher. Mm-hmm. And she worked multiple jobs and she's an incredibly smart but humble person. And I was like, your future generations are going to hear your story and be inspired by you. And she was like, why are you making me cry in the middle of the day? She was like, but it's true. Like, really think about what you're doing with your life. Like, this isn't just you. This is a legacy that you're building. And again, like, the child factor is important to me. Obviously, I have the kids, but like, even if you don't, you have family. Like this is it. You are impacting people's lives, and that's your legacy. And so using writing for stress relief is important. Using writing to help get you to what you want to be and to your true authentic self, that's there. It's important. But that legacy element is so incredibly impactful.
Well, clearly you're a podcaster because you just effortlessly summarize our entire episode. And so I do not need to do that. That for us in the most beautiful way. Jenny, thank you so much for being here. Listener, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I have. We'll have all of these links in the episode description, including her podcast, which please go over and listen to my episode over there, as well as plenty of others for inspiration and motivation and empowerment. And again, Jenny, thank you for being here with us today.
Of course. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Always.